Today, the Department of Justice and our partners are announcing a series of fraud charges being unsealed today in the Central District of California. You will hear in a moment about the nature of these charges. It is important first, however, to understand why the work to stamp out fraud matters. This work matters because every single day, the hard-earned tax dollars of Americans are being robbed. The lowest estimate of theft from taxpayers each year is around $230 billion. If you spent $1 million every single day, you would still be spending after 600 years. And $230 billion is the lowest estimate. Some models estimate far higher annual fraud amounts. It also matters because fraudsters who target taxpayer dollars do not just steal from taxpayers. They also prevent critical benefits from reaching those in need and sow seeds of distrust in government institutions and civil society. No more. No more. The whole of government, including all of the great partners on this stage, is focused on unmasking the criminal actors who are exploiting the American taxpayer. The President's whole of government anti-fraud task force, led by Vice President Vance, is already urgently on the move. The goal is to secure the financial integrity of our country because the American people deserve a federal government that stewards their money wisely and protects it from wrongdoers. As for the Department of Justice, under Attorney General Bondi's leadership, we are laser focused on investigating and prosecuting every culpable criminal actor in the chain of culpability, all of those responsible for defrauding the United States of America. Our goal is deterrence. Stop the lies, stop the dishonesty, stop the theft. If you don't, we will be coming, because no one should be allowed to rip off the United States of America. With that, let me introduce the First Assistant United States Attorney for the Central District of California, Bill Essayli, to highlight the enforcement actions from today. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's been a busy morning here. Once again, I'm Bill Essayli. I'm the First Assistant U.S. Attorney for this office. Last month, President Trump appointed Vice President Vance to lead the White House task force to eliminate fraud. Just yesterday, Vice President sworn in Colin McDonald to be our new Assistant Attorney General for National Fraud Enforcement. We're excited to work with him, and I know that I speaking regularly with Attorney General Bondi. Nothing is more important right now than rooting out the corruption and fraud that's happening with the tax dollars, not only in the United States, but particularly here in the state of California. And that's what we're going to focus on today. This morning, we executed Operation Never Say Die. Federal agents from multiple agencies descended on fraudsters throughout Southern California, executing multiple arrests and search warrants. We arrested 8 defendants, including medical providers such as nurses and doctors. We are announcing charges against 15 separate individuals who engaged in healthcare fraud, resulting in losses close to $60 million. The individuals targeted this morning were committing a variety of healthcare frauds in the greater Los Angeles County area, including operating fraudulent hospice care facilities. You're going to hear a lot about that this morning. Medicare reimbursed these companies for services that were intended to go to patients dying from a terminal illness. Instead, as the complaints and the indictments charge in what's been unsealed today, these defendants recruited beneficiaries who were not terminally ill and paid them to pose as patients receiving hospice care. Medicare then paid millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, on false and fraudulent claims submitted by fraudsters. This happens often way too much, particularly here in LA County. And again, the losses for the hospice fraud we are staggering. I think Dr. Oz will have some numbers for you. For example, let's talk about one of the defendants that was arrested this morning. Lolita Minard, a 65-year-old woman in Anaheim. She ran a company named Topanga Hospice Care. She billed Medicare for more than $9.1 million over a 5-year period for the care of supposedly terminally ill patients. This company had a death discharge rate of 85%. When you go to hospice, you're going there to die. You're not supposed to have an 85 survival rate coming out of your hospice facility. That is 5 times more than the national average of 17%. So you want to know how these schemes work. I'll tell you how she did it. One of the beneficiaries are the people whose names are being listed as the patients at the hospice. One of the beneficiary couples we spoke to said that she approached them at a market, or that they were approached at a grocery store about signing up for her hospice care. Minard and 3 other Topanga employees visited these individuals at their home and promised them if they signed up, everything would be free, and that they would each receive $300 in cash per month. The money was delivered in an envelope, again in cash, so this couple got $600 a month to allow her to use their names on these fraudulent invoices that are then sent over to Medicare. Neither of them had a terminal illness, and they received things such as nutritional shakes, non-prescription vitamins, and wheelchairs on top of their $300 per month. Again, Medicare paid more than $8.5 million on this defendant's fraudulent claims. That's just one example, and that's the story of how these hospice frauds occur. Here's another couple, the Gills. This one's particularly egregious because they are medical providers. Gladwin Gill is a doctor, he's a psychologist. His wife, Miss Gill, is a registered nurse, and they operated what's known as 626 Hospice in Glendale. Interesting enough, they both have a criminal history for tax evasion, and so they're not actually allowed to open up a hospice. So what do? They use their daughter's name to open the hospice. So they're operating this fraudulent hospice under their daughter's name, and the nurse would fabricate and add things to the medical file to make it look like the beneficiaries were terminally ill when they weren't. This particular hospice submitted more than $5.2 million in fraudulent claims, and Medicare actually paid out more than $4 million. And so again, it's another fraudulent hospice. Their discharge rate of survivors is above 70%. All 22 beneficiaries that we spoke with had no terminal illness. They did not qualify for hospice care. And so what's interesting about this case is it's been on the radar of the federal government for a while. I was talking to Dr. Oz about this. Search warrant was actually executed in 2022, but nothing happened with these cases. Nothing's happened with fraud under the prior administration. And you'll have to ask them why, but presumably it just wasn't a priority. And so we are making fraud a priority. So quickly, within the last year, we've been working at lightning speed to put these cases together, and you're seeing the fruits of that today. And I think you'll be seeing many more of these operations in the months ahead. And then this was another couple that was arrested this morning. This couple tells a slightly different story. Let's see here. Nita Palma, 76 years old, 3-time convicted healthcare fraudster who's actually in federal prison. She's charged in a new case because she perpetuated a new hospice fraud while she's in prison. That is how egregious and bold some of these fraudsters are. She's charged with opening and running a hospice care company with her husband in Glendale. She did so despite being legally barred from running a hospice facility and being a convicted felon. Her husband, Adolfo Katbagan, was arrested this morning. And they both face decades in prison for their role in this scheme. Together, they submitted over a 20-month span of invoices for $4.8 million in fraudulent hospice care claims. They received $4.2 million from Medicare. So again, I just want to highlight a few examples of the people that were arrested this morning. Look, this is not just a fraud problem. This is a California problem. I want to be very frank about this. The federal government is the purse. All the money comes from the federal government, but it's administered through the states. California is responsible for issuing hospice licenses. They're responsible for regulating doctors and nurses. And the problem that you see in California is that there is no vetting and there's no checking. They do not care because it's not their money, is the way the state of California looks at it. And so in California, I call California the kingdom of fraud, and Gavin Newsom reigns over this kingdom here. You have hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud. If you look at the EDD fraud, the SNAP benefits fraud, the health hospice fraud, the homeless fraud that my office has done, one thing is in common. No vetting, no checking. Money goes out the door with no questions asked, no receipts, no checking up on them. In fact, and maybe Dr. Oz will talk about this, California's own auditor said they need to put better regulations in place so they can have oversight over the hospices. They were required by January 1st of this year to adopt emergency regulations cracking down on fraudulent hospices. That deadline was January 1st. They did not pass the guidelines. You'll have to ask the governor, Governor Newsom, and the Department of Public Health why they refuse to issue proper guidelines and have proper oversight on hospices. So when the state says that they are taking fraud seriously, it's a bold-faced lie. They are not taking it seriously. They're not passing the regulations, and they're not sending people to prison. And that's what we're doing here today with this task force. We're providing the oversight that's been missing from California for a very long time. All right, with that, I want to invite Dr. Oz to come up and say a few words. Thank you, Dr. Oz.
Thanks, Billy. So I spent the morning together with a SWAT team that met at 5 a.m. and went after, in our case, the Gills at 6 a.m. with a carefully choreographed effort to shut down fraudsters who have been at it for an earliest recollection from law enforcement around 2018, indictments in 2022. And I want to applaud the U.S. Attorney, Bill Essayli, the entire team here, Colin for leading this task force, because what you're witnessing right now is a seismic shift in how the Trump administration is going to change what was going on in the prior Biden administration. And we spoke to Vice President Vance this morning. There was a task force meeting. The first one was last week. As you all know, we had a press conference the day after the State of the Union when he was announced, leading the task force to announce actions by CMS, which included deferring of payments to Minnesota and a nationwide moratorium on durable medical equipment. However, hospice in Southern California is an entire different level of fraud. And these law enforcement leaders and the brave men and women that I was able to witness this morning go after these criminals are doing God's work, and they're going to be able to do it more effectively because there's been a demand made by the president and the vice president that is an all-of-government effort. All of us have to talk to each other, which means CMS, which runs insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, the ACA, Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, all the insurance public elements need to communicate very swiftly with law enforcement, with Treasury, with everybody else whose fingerprints might actually be helpful in figuring out the problems. Now, the accused criminals in this case, as Billy mentioned, are a doctor and a nurse. Shameful that licensed professionals will be involved in this. And we've talked about the monetary costs, and I will focus on those as well, but the human cost should not be forgotten. If you're willing to steal money from the American people, from patients, you're willing to sacrifice their health, and you're willing to give up their lives. And we have witnessed that with multiple individuals who have come forward, now that they feel like it's safe to go up and stand up and be held for what they have witnessed in their lives. The affordability crisis that was highlighted by Colin is a real one. $100 billion minimum just in health care from Medicare and Medicaid is our estimate. The Medicare Trust Fund, the fund that will make sure Medicare is there for you if you're watching right now. All of you are working your tails off, hoping Medicare will be with you. We would double the life expectancy of the Medicare Trust Fund if we could cut out the fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicare alone. Working families across America would benefit from having more money to pay towards all the things that can sometimes plague your family, and your health is your most valuable thing. Folks who are sick only want one thing in the world: to get their health back. And that's what we're going to give them by making sure the money is in the system to pay for them. California Hospice, to give you some hard numbers, 1,800 hospices in California. Is that the right number? when nationwide we have just over 6,000 hospices. So why would almost 1/3 of all the hospices in the whole country be in Los Angeles County? I'm not talking about all of California, just right here. And the U.S. Attorney is absolutely right. That is, you should be incredulous. We are, and we're going after these folks. We believe half of them are fraudulent. Half of the 1,800 hospices should not be in business if we are able to identify the red flags. And that's what we're basing these numbers on. These are not random assumptions. World experts at CMS say if you've got 100% or near survival, certainly if you've got a survival over 50% for a population that's supposed to have passed in 6 months, you've got a problem. If you're clustered in the same buildings as other crooks, if you're sharing employee numbers and license numbers, if you've got a small number of people, less than 50 members, you do that because you can hide what's really going on when they're small, because you don't have reporting obligations. J1 visa holders, there are lots of things going on in California that just are not rational, and we're going to take them out. These defendants that you heard about, there were 7 hospices. I want to pat them on the back. The entire first 4 years of really looking at this issue since 2021, when the report came out from the Auditor General here in California, the entire first 4 years, there were 4 hospices that were revoked. 4 hospices. 7 of them were, criminal charges today. So you see a dramatic and appropriate shift. There are other people involved that the U.S. Attorney is going after. Fariba Javarian, probably read about last night, was had her billing privileges revoked by CMS yesterday. She had generated $127 million of billing. And for some reason, although everyone knew that there was a problem there, her 113 agencies that she worked with, 113 agencies, one doctor was working with, had billed over the last 3 years $127 million. CMS is going to suspend payments to stop money from leaving the U.S. That's our goal. We're going to review every single hospice in California to make sure that they're all appropriate, and we hope to do that expeditiously. We'll do it this year. And I'm going to make an announcement today, because I'm going to throw the gauntlet down for Governor Newsom. When asked about the hospice fraud in California, that again was in his own administration was involved in barking how bad our issue was in 2021, he responds by saying that he's been responsible for taking out 280 of these hospices. In the 10 weeks since we first were together in front of you, in the 10 weeks, we have taken out 221 hospices already. 221. We will surpass the governor's achievements in the first 4 years within the month, we believe. And so we need to get serious, and we don't see that happening in California. The ecosystem is rotten. We've uncovered lots of other derivatives that happen when you don't take care of this fraud in the way it needs to be done. And I'll give you a good example. Your neighbors in Nevada are suffering because the fraudsters here are now going there, and they have a 7-fold increase in hospice because when people get a little chilled in California, they head there. So how are we going to do this? And all the government approaches you've heard. If you're defrauding Medicare, listen carefully. If you're defrauding Medicare, start running, because we are coming for you. Don't walk, run away. The folks that are on stage here and all over the country under the leadership of President Trump and Vice President Vance and his task force are not going to tolerate it. None of us can afford the luxury of being sloppy about this. And I want to highlight something that the U.S. Attorney Essayli just mentioned. That document that he showed you, that was a health and safety code in the state of California made in response to an Auditor General report that was supposed to be in effect on January 1st that would have helped to clean up the mess here. For some reason that I don't understand and no one has been able to explain to me, on December 19th, 11 days before it's supposed to take effect, it was withdrawn. I'd like someone in Sacramento to explain why that happened. Why is the state of California not willing to help deal with the theft of federal tax dollars? Because although we pay 2/3 of the bill, the taxpayers in California pay the other third. Why wouldn't you want the help? For Medicaid and for hospice, of course, it's all on our back. Doesn't make it any better. God bless you. Thanks for your work.
Thank you, Dr. Oz. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Akil Davis. I'm the Assistant Director in charge of the FBI's Los Angeles Field Office. As you've heard already, early this morning, the FBI and many of our partners up here served a series of arrest warrants throughout the Southland, covering cities such as Covina, Anaheim, Glendale, Lakewood, and even as far away as Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, as part of Operation Never Say Die. In all its disturbing forms, fraud historically does not get the attention it deserves, so I'm glad to see a national spotlight on this pervasive crime problem. The reality is that everyone, all of us here, everyone pays for healthcare fraud. As health insurance premiums, co-payments, taxes increase, our benefits decrease. The FBI has recognized the Southern California region as a high-risk environment for hospice-related healthcare fraud. So while it is not a new problem for us, I'm thankful to have the support you see here today. Many of these defendants, some who you've heard of already, are nurses as well as psychologists, not only violated the respective oaths they made, but stole money intended for people who are terminally ill. One defendant I want to highlight again, I know that you've heard of many of them. One I want to highlight, Nita Palma, convicted 3 times, is alleged to have brazenly operated 3 fraudulent hospice facilities while free on bond and awaiting trial in a separate fraud case. Many of the defendants used the proceeds for their mortgage payments, car payments, international travel, luxury items, or they sent money overseas. I'd like to thank our partners here today, HHS, OIG, the Department of Labor, IRS, and of course, United States Attorney's Office. If you are aware of anyone soliciting you or others to participate in healthcare fraud or being offered cash payments in order to use a name, address, and a false claim, please call your nearest FBI office. You can reach us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or tips.fbi.gov. Now I'd like to turn it over to SAC of HHS OIG, Rob Breeden.
Thank you and good morning. Our investigators at HHS OIG and our analysts work tirelessly to expose wrongdoing and protect the Medicare program and its enrollees. I'd like to thank them for the service and recognize them for their efforts. I'd also like to thank CMS Administrator Dr. Oz for bringing national attention to this problem, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, Mr. Essayli, for fully backing our efforts. As demonstrated today, we will continue working with our law enforcement partners to pursue aggressively anyone who unlawfully profits from federal health care programs. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony D'Esposito. I am the Inspector General for the Department of Labor. There is no question that fraud is a tax on the American people. And I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned this morning is the fact that many of the law enforcement agencies up here, including inspectors general offices throughout the United States of America, have consistently investigated fraud. The difference today is that we have leaders. We have common sense leaders like our U.S. Attorney, like Colin McDonald, like Dr. Oz, like Vice President Vance and President Trump, who have clearly stated that no fraud is too small and that we will hunt, we will prosecute, and we will put those taking advantage of the American people behind bars. And there is no question that in places like here in California, in my home state of New York, in Minnesota and Illinois, failed leadership and broken or no guardrails has led to individuals taking advantage of these resources. One of the things you hear over and over again from our partners is the fact that these people have been convicted over and over again. It is a revolving door of justice. But now we have leaders who are willing to listen to law enforcement professionals, who want to prosecute these cases and want to hold people accountable. That's what the American people should want. It shouldn't be a Republican or Democrat issue. This is an American issue. And the fact that President Trump has made it very clear that the war on fraud is paramount should tell all Americans what he believes in. I want to thank everyone who participated today, and I especially want to thank the team from the Department of Labor Inspector General's office. They was out this morning in hunt of 2 perpetrators, arrested 1 who not only took advantage of health insurance resources, but also violated the trust and took money from labor unions for well over $10 million. A job well done to everyone here. And to everyone that is listening at home, remember, as everyone has said, if you are committing fraud, if you are taking advantage of the American people, sleep with one eye open, because we are investigating and we are coming for you. The HSI is next.
Good morning. My name is Dwayne Angebrandt. I'm a Deputy Special Agent in charge for HSI Los Angeles. And I'm here to talk about electronic benefit transfer benefits and fraud that happens in the EBT space. Since 2002, we've been investigating fraudulent activity in transnational criminal organizations that are perpetrating this fraud throughout the community. In basic principle, these individuals place skimming devices on credit card machines within the community, stealing the data off those cards, creating cloned cards, and at the beginning of the month, when the EBT benefits are deposited, they steal those funds from the beneficiaries. Over the past 4 years, $310 million has been stolen from recipients of SNAP in the community. This is a problem that is perpetrated because while fellow law enforcement and law enforcement community in general have pleaded with the state of California to put effective measures in place to protect these cards, the measures that have been put in place are ineffective, and the fraud continues today. This morning, we arrested 3 individuals and seized multiple phones, over 100 of cloned cards, as well as cash that they withdrew from accounts. Over the last year, we've arrested 49 individuals. 42 of those are foreign nationals, mostly from Romania. The Romanian culture seeks this area. They seek out loopholes in the laws, loopholes in benefit structure, and they exploit them. And until the state of California can shore up those loopholes, this fraud will continue. I want to thank our partners in this investigation from the U.S. Secret Service, Health and Human Services Office of the Inspector General, U.S. Attorney's Office, and our local partners. That includes Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Los Angeles Police Department, Covina PD, El Segundo PD, Hermosa Beach PD, Irwindale PD, and Torrance PD. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So basically, the big picture is the party's over, at least in the state of California. So the gravy train's over, the party's over, and we're coming for fraudsters. The magnitude of the problem is so immense, it's large. We have to put all our resources together and figure out how we're going to tackle the worst of the worst and how we're going to shut down the fraud from beginning in the first place. With that, we'll take a few questions. Yes, sir.
Mr. Essayli, I'm Ross Palumbo from CBS LA. You're aware that CBS News did an investigation identifying more than 700 of these potentially fraudulent hospice locations. We've also done an investigation on more than 800 fraudulent businesses established using legal immigrant identities, but then registered through the state of California to make them appear to be more legitimate. The governor will not speak about that. The Secretary of State will not comment on any safeguards in place to prevent this from happening. What are your thoughts about the state's role in that crime, and what can you do about that?
One thing I want to be clear, this is the beginning, not the end. You're going to see more of these charges, more arrests, more of the takedowns. You're going to see them clustered every other month or so. So this is not the beginning, this is the end. We have many, many, many open, active criminal investigations. I'm not going to talk about any specific case, but what you're talking about is exactly what we highlighted. California has totally given up its responsibility to make sure that fraud isn't happening in its territory. So you're right, California is basically enabling the fraudsters by handing them the keys to the Medicare piggy bank. Because when California hands someone a hospice license, that allows them to access the Medicare system and to build a Medicare system. Without that, this fraud could not occur. So why California does not want to clamp down on how it conducts oversight, I can't tell you why. They were supposed to pass regulations to address just that. Again, January 1st, they failed to do that. So there's a reason I call Gavin Newsom the king of fraud, because he reigns over more fraud than I think we've seen in the history of the United States of America. Hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud have gone out the door under his reign as the king of fraud. So I don't really know why he does what he does, but that's what he's doing.
Will you now look into this fraud that we've uncovered?
We have many active criminal investigations. I think we had a tip line. Did we put it out? 1-800-CALL-FBI. If you have information, send it to them. We are looking at, again, many investigations. I won't talk about anything coming up in the pipe. Yes, Joe.
All right, so there's a mention that there were some Romanian nationals arrested. How many of those arrested are from other countries? And
Yeah.
also, how many have been arrested? And should anybody in the state be held accountable for this legally?
So a couple things, and thanks for asking. What HSI talked about, the SNAP benefits fraud, those arrests are separate and apart from this operation today. So those arrests today are in addition to the folks that we were discussing in the hospice fraud. That is the SNAP benefits, the food stamps that are being drained from people who need them by fraudsters. And the reason they're being drained is because the state, again, has failed to put in basic security measures so people cannot skim the EBT cards, duplicate them, clone them, and take the money from people's accounts. And before, the state hasn't really cared, because if you got defrauded, the federal government would just replenish the funds and you get your money. But those days are over. And so California needs to do better. As far as that group of defendants, they are of Romanian descent. The folks today were primarily of South Asian descent, I believe. There were two, at least, foreign nationals, one from the Philippines, one from North Korea. So again, there is no one foreign national group that has a monopoly on fraud. We see this in different foreign communities.
You have provided a hotline, and Victor with Univision, you are providing a hotline and are inviting people to report these type of crimes.
Yes.
Most of them are taking advantage of immigrants, whether legal or illegal.
Yes.
What would be the message to those immigrants that might be afraid to contact federal authorities in lieu of these rates in the past?
I will tell you, when it comes to immigration enforcement, we do target violent and criminal illegal immigrants. That is the focus of our immigration enforcement. However, anyone who's here unlawfully is subject to our laws until Congress changes that. So we do want to hear from victims. I mean, do you have any add on that? Or
Yeah, you can remain anonymous, tips.fbi.gov, to those immigrant communities that are fearful of that. We need to know about all of these frauds so that we can appropriately address them and investigate them.
And those stay anonymous.
Yeah, but the FBI is they're not looking to use that tip line to deport people, if that's your question.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you.
A question for Mr. Essayli. Would you be able to tell us the percentage of cases being prosecuted right now that began under this administration, and perhaps the number of cases that were prosecuted for suspected hospice fraud under the first Trump administration?
Yeah. I don't have the numbers our numbers didn't go back that far. What I can tell you is under the prior administration, I think we found 4 cases, hospice cases of fraud in this charges.
In the last 4 years, 4 cases of hospice were prosecuted. But you're asking a question about the first Trump administration. A lot of what happened during hospice fraud really started to take off during COVID. Several things happened at once. People working outside the workplace, easier to game systems, but we also taught an entire generation of fraudsters that the government was an easy target with some of the lax regulations around the money that was doled out during COVID. Now, it was an emergency, we understand and can look back in time and criticize it, but we definitely made mistakes in passing money out, and some of the individuals that were arrested today may have been involved in some of those scams as well. But once you give people a taste of fraud, and if there's a government that's not enforcing its own rules, they'll come back for more and more and more. And we're seeing that across healthcare. And just to follow up with the question about foreign nationals, there are many foreign national groups involved in fraud across America. The problem with durable medical equipment suppliers in South Florida, where we have twice as many of these suppliers as McDonald's. Is primarily a Cuban population. They do flee back to Cuba when they're chased. We have a problem with Chinese government involvement, we believe, in Flushing, New York, and some of these social adult daycare center problems that they're having there. We have other fraudulent groups here in California. You know about the Somalis in Minnesota, so we have Russian gangsters in Philadelphia. There are foreign governments that are targeting the soft underbelly of the U.S. social safety care system. We're a loving people. All great people protect their most vulnerable. Because we're a great nation, we'll do that as well. Other people are taking advantage of us, and if they're not foreign nationals, they at least don't have our values, because they're willing to steal from our most vulnerable. And again, if you're willing to steal people's money, you will steal their health. You won't even think about it.
Mr. Essayli, you mentioned a search warrant was executed in 2022, and then little happened between then and now. Can you explain more about why that happened?
Yeah, it's really simple. It comes down to one word, that's leadership. Leadership matters. And so when you have, the president, the vice president have said, focus on fraud, then we reorient our resources to do that. So unfortunately, I can't tell you why, but under the prior administration, fraud was not the focus. Government fraud was not a priority. So the case just sort of languished. I know as Rob is here, I mean, you've been with HHS OIG a long time. Have you ever seen this much work in this space? You know.
I can tell you cases have their own personality. They progress at their own speed. Every case is unique, so I can't comment on one case versus the next case. I can tell you we're vigilant. If we see something going on, we act, we don't hesitate. But you don't always see that from the public side. But behind the scenes, we are acting on every tip we receive.
Yes.
Are any of these arrests connected to that area in Van Nuys where Dr. Oz filmed a video saying it was a hotbed for fraud?
This particular group of defendants is not. That is not that location.
Okay.
But again, I'll just say we have many active investigations going on. I can't comment on any specific case.
All right, 2 more questions.
Just a quick follow-up for Dr. Oz as well. Can you respond to community concerns that said that video was discriminatory in any way to the immigrant groups there?
I was stating the facts as they've been explained to me, and we have a lot of evidence of where the fraud is just looking at the numbers. If you have hundreds of hospices in a small area, you should be suspicious because it's not naturally what happens with hospice care. And we're going to pursue the law and try to do the best as we should to make sure the American people are protected, but even more so from my perspective as a doctor, the folks are protected with regard to their health, because some of these systems are not designed to take care of human beings. And if you saw some of the horror stories we deal with every single day, folks, pushed in the hospice erroneously, they give up their real insurance, they lose Medicare when they go to hospice, so they no longer have coverage. So there are lots of victims to these crimes.
Last question, Joe.
Yeah, in Minnesota there was a pause in payments for some federal funds. Has there been any conversation about that here in California? And following up from before, can anybody at the state here be held responsible or facing legal consequences with this?
You answer the first one.
The process that took place in Minnesota is being examined in other states as well. We've sent a letter asking for information. We're now looking at issues that we need to follow up on.
Let me just answer Joe's question real quick about holding people in the state responsible. Nobody's above the law. If we find evidence in our investigation that anyone within the state system was facilitating the fraud or otherwise benefited personally from the fraud, you bet you they will be arrested and charged by this administration, without a doubt. Now, a lot of what you're seeing, though, is just flat out malpractice, malfeasance. It's malpractice. The state just doesn't want to do anything about the fraud. But we will work these cases up. We start with folks at the bottom level of the fraud, and you know what? They're facing a lot of time. They may want to cooperate. That's how these things work sometimes, and that's when we'll learn about potential insiders. But that does take time, and again, no one was looking at this until we all got here. So with that, thank you guys very much.